My name is Stephen Krein. I'm the CEO and co-founder of StartUp Health, and I'm really excited for our talk today about the work we've been doing for the last 18 months, which is really a culmination of the work we've been doing for the last 13 years at StartUp Health, which is about building entrepreneurial community around solving some of the biggest health challenges of our time. And for today's session, we're going to be talking about type 1 diabetes and specifically how a community of innovators, entrepreneurs, doctorpreneurs, academic founders, even research teams can come together and collaborate to work together to prevent, manage, and cure diabetes. And so with me on stage are not just a bunch of entrepreneurs working individually on their own initiatives and on their own moonshots. They are collaborating on this type 1 diabetes moonshot. And we thought it would be fun, not just to have the entrepreneurs on stage to talk about the moonshot, but we wanted to bring one of the people from one of the organizations that has made this entire moonshot possible. And I'm going to start with you, David Panzirer from the Helmsley Trust, who about a year ago made a commitment to us to really spearhead and anchor the type 1 diabetes moonshot. So David, welcome. I want to ask you to quickly introduce yourself and share your mission at the Helmsley Trust and why you care about type 1 diabetes. And then I'm going to ask each of you to follow suit and do the same thing.
Sure. So it's great to be here. I appreciate the invite. My name's David Panzirer. I'm a trustee at the Helmsley Trust. And the reason why I'm interested in type 1 diabetes is my oldest daughter was diagnosed back in 2007. Then in 2017, I diagnosed my second daughter myself. And knock wood, my son does not have the disease. I started traveling and learning quite a bit. And what became very, very clear is there's so much low-hanging fruit with health disparities. And I spent quite a bit of time in sub-Saharan Africa where the health disparities are exacerbated that much further with poverty and food insecurity. So I quickly realized that my mission is not just to help my children, which is why I get up every day, but they'll be fine. But there's so many others that won't be, and that's why we're heavily involved in type 1 diabetes.
And before we move on to everyone introduce themselves, if you could just share your vision for the Helmsley Trust and its work. You, along with JDRF, outside of the government, are the two biggest funders of type 1 diabetes research and innovation.
Yeah, so I believe cure is a fundraising word. I hope that I'm wrong, but I wouldn't be first online for it. But we spend a lot of our time improving care so that if we ever find the elusive cure, people will be healthy enough to participate. And that's really the mission.
Thanks, David. Diane.
Hi, I'm Diane Alexander, CEO and co-founder of Pramana Pharmaceuticals. And our solution in type 1 diabetes is for a once-a-day oral prevention for hypoglycemia.
Yeah. So my name is Adam Graybill, so I'm the CEO and co-founder of Journey Biosciences. From a mission perspective, we're about empowering patients with type 1 diabetes and all diabetes to really leverage predictive technologies to improve their health outcomes.
So, sorry, Diane and Adam, before we go on, why do you care so much about type 1 diabetes? Each of you, if you could talk about that for just a second.
Well, my family's been affected by both type 2 and type 1 diabetes. And my friends, I've got many friends with type 1 diabetes, and particularly suffering with constant hypoglycemia. So I know what they're going through to achieve glycemic control. So for me, it's a big mission.
Yeah, so for me, my connection really began when I was maybe 3 or 4 years old, and a good friend, Tim, was diagnosed with type 1. I was the closest friend and basically his watchdog, and really kind of helping him navigate. Later on, I was fortunate enough to start working in healthcare and in the diabetes industry. So for the last 20 years, I've really been supporting type 1 community as well as the broader diabetes community. And ultimately, that's why it matters. Also spent some time working with JDRF as well.
Fantastic. I think everybody has to talk close to the microphone to make sure everyone can.
Hi, everyone. I am Farhaneh Ahmadi. I am the co-founder and CEO of eddii. At eddii, we gamify and humanize real-time glucose data. We want users to have an enjoyable experience managing their diabetes every hour of every day. We educate them about diabetes and we offer them support in the form of virtual care, particularly in rural areas, in areas where access to endocrinologists is limited. Why I care about type 1 diabetes, I live with type 1 diabetes. I was diagnosed in 2007 myself. It was one of the most lonely experiences you can ever imagine. Something that you have to manage round the clock. And even though, I was a PhD, I had no problem with managing data, but that amount of data overload, it was even a lot for me. That is why we want to make it, we want to make it a delightful experience to manage your diabetes every day. And it's a pleasure to be here with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy?
Hi, I'm Amy Cohn. I'm the CEO and founder of Joydays, and we are actually a little bit of an outlier here. We are actually food. We are bringing a modern food brand specifically to someone with diabetes and things that they miss so you don't feel otherized. Because a lot of things out there that are catered in the food system tend to look medicinal and dated and pretty much embarrassing, and they scream you have a chronic condition. And so we look to create a brand for what people miss most. And more importantly, someone with type 1, a child with type 1 can have the same thing that they have in their lunchbox and another kid next to them eat it. So we are branching out into really merging what is food as medicine into what that actually means and being on grocery store shelves with every other food, just like for everyone else. Type 1 diabetes actually runs in my family. And some of my closest friends have children that have it. I had older uncles that had it. And I think similar to what you said is you don't really know how hard it is until you go through something. And I started this after going through colon cancer a few years ago. And it was only until I went through that understood and had deep empathy for what it's like to have things that are not necessarily, they're made for you, but there's somebody's marketing idea of what that should look like. So
Thank you, Amy. Ole.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ole Nielsen. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called GoPen. It's 100 years ago since this year that insulin became commercially available in the US. One of the biggest innovations over the last 50 years, the introduction of insulin pens. Unfortunately, today there's still 20% that are using syringes to inject insulin out of economic reasons. We don't think they should. We want everyone to have access to a modern insulin pen. I'm connected to type 1 diabetes. My sister, when she was diagnosed, it was like she changed completely. In the 10 years until she was well regulated, it was like a completely different person that was hard to talk to and hard to actually meet and be with. And then when she got better regulations, then suddenly I got my sister back, and it just connected with me. And I've been working 10 years in Novo Nordisk with the disease and seen people in developing nations with it. So it's really, really close to my heart. So I'm glad to be here and learn together with all you guys. It's always an experience. Thank you for setting this up.
Thanks, Ole. And one of the things that I've learned about type 1 diabetes since we launched this Moonshot is how many people don't understand type 1 diabetes. To a lot of people, it's just diabetes. And I think you've all spoken today about your own personal experiences, but I want to start with you, David. What is type 1 diabetes? Why and how should we think about it? And more importantly, what is the most misunderstood thing about type 1 diabetes?
Yeah, so to keep it short, type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease where your body attacks and kills its own insulin-producing cells. Insulin's a hormone that allows your body to metabolize carbs. Without insulin, you're dead. It's just a matter of time. So it's the only disease that I know of where you're making dosing decisions with a drug that can kill you. You make those decisions 24/7 without the benefit of the clinician 99.9% of the time. And if you get it right 60% of the time, you're doing amazing. There are 40-something things that impact blood sugars. We can measure 2 of them. So it's really, you're really taking on the role of a pancreas. And as I said, if you get it right 60% of the time, you're doing amazing. I don't know of another disease that puts that kind of burden day to day on people every day, no break ever.
So taking that as a kind of talking point around education, I think, it's very easy for companies, digital health, biotech, life sciences, be working on solutions. One of the things that we've been really focused on at the core of StartUp Health from the very beginning was mission-driven entrepreneurs trying to solve the biggest health challenges of our time. And for a decade, we've had moonshots as categories to organize the efforts of different entrepreneurs and innovators and funders. This began a new journey, the launch of the Type 1 Diabetes Moonshot, to really go deep with entrepreneurs, founders and funders and research teams to really understand how more people can understand some of the basics. So I want to ask anyone on this panel with me, where does this begin for you in terms of even talking to people about type 1 diabetes and how important it is to make sure that you're really not in the business of just educating people, but finding other people to work with you about or work on solving type 1 diabetes?
It's a good question. So I'll start with giving an example. We were at White Plains, New York yesterday, and we were speaking with the families of children who live with T1D there. And a few educators came up to us and they were like, we hear that you are offering virtual care very soon and that the kids love your platform. We have individuals in our communities with an average blood sugar of 392. Imagine. Like 392 is their average. What sort of future and healthcare does this individual have? And there are very limited things that their care teams can do for them in terms of access. They have to drive really long, educating them. These are teenagers who rebel. So it's a place for us to start educating these children in a very friendly way, understandable way, and their families. A lot of these families are also broken families. So one child is taken care of by 3 different people. They move home to home. And we speak to them and try to close that gap as much as we can. By whomever is taking care of them, at least they can get on the app and speak to their nurse practitioner anytime that they want. And it is a combination of not understanding the condition well, education, training, and there being someone they can speak to, a platform they can use so that we can drive those health outcomes better and better over time. It never goes away, unfortunately, and it's something, especially as a T1D, you just have to accept. And when we accept it, life becomes more tolerable. So we're trying to work with them to reach those health outcomes as soon as we can.
Yeah, I think from our perspective at Journey Biosciences, so I think part of what is interesting, so our origin story really starts with our founder, so Dr. Beiswinger, who is an endocrinologist. He grew tired after he couldn't find a cure for type 1 and really wanted to focus on the complications. So his research for the next 30 years was really centered on, if I can't cure it, how do I make it easier and empower patients with information that's actionable? So we're excited to really launch the first predictive technology within type 1, as well as later on we identified that we could also identify it in type 2, but really being able to predict risk of kidney disease or diabetes-related kidney disease 12 years in advance of any clinical signs and symptoms really empowers the patient and allows them and their clinicians to start taking actions and hopefully provide not only more years and a better quality of year, but really knowledge of what their individual risk is or what it's not.
So one of the things that was at the core of why we launched the Type 1 Diabetes Moonshot was to get people talking about what they need, what entrepreneurs need, and how people around the ecosystem, whether it be funders, whether it be payers, providers, pharma, can become part of the solution with entrepreneurs. Not one of you, I think, started the company because you just had an idea of starting a company. There's a lot easier places to go to innovate. what are the unique capabilities you're adding or contributing to the Moonshot, and what other capabilities do you need to be successful? You're each coming at this from a different perspective, and from our fundamental belief, a Moonshot is about collaboration. It's about not one company or one organization has all the answers. And the moon landing back in the 60s was 400,000 people and 20,000 companies trying to land a man on the moon and bring him safely back. And so we think about type 1 diabetes similarly, that it's everyone's contributing something different. So I'd love to hear, Ole, what's your unique capabilities, and then what do you rely on from others to help you be successful?
Yeah, thank you. So maybe one thing that that is unique, at least I feel that I'm good at, is if like seeing a situation instead of saying, okay, what could be a solution to this problem that we see right here? What could be a solution that would work not only for the patient but also in the value chain? I think that is at least something that, and it comes with my gray hair maybe. But I don't know. So that could be one thing, and I'd love to share, if you like, that. But that is only ideas. You need to do so much more to get that idea from your head to the people that are investing in you, to the community, to finally making a product. And what are the things that you need there? That is, I think this event is one of those things. You need friends to help tell this story, because the whole story is so big. I'm from Denmark. Novo Nordisk is in Denmark. So diabetes, type 1, type 2, people actually understand it. Some of the local investors understand it. But when you get out of that notch, sort of out of the country, you really need a lot of storytelling to make people to understand what it is. And that, I think, the T1D Moonshot is super, super important in that effort. Thank you for doing it.
So, David, you've been funding type 1 diabetes since 2008, so 15 years. You've seen a lot. You guys put, I don't know, figures over $100 million a year into type 1 diabetes research. What's missing? And why are we sitting here 15 years later? Why are we sitting here decades later from when people were originally talking about a cure and everything in between?
If I knew what was missing, we'd be done. I don't know what's missing. I'd be lying, and anybody who says they know what's missing is probably fundraising or lying to you as well. But look, there's so much low-hanging fruit here, and the care is so poor, not only here in the U.S., but everywhere. Steve, for me, it's about improving care while continuing to fund research. So it's many, many shots on goal, which is why we fund companies. We don't just fund in academia. The large majority of academics are never going to commercialize anything, with all due respect. The large majority. There's a huge exception here in this room, probably, hopefully. But what we found is, and the reason why we really got involved with you guys, is you bridge a gap that nobody else was really playing, specifically the education piece on what people need, what you all need coming out of a startup, right? So at the end of the day, you really need to understand, what do people with diabetes want and need, number one. Number two, you better understand who's playing in the space industry-wide and what they're doing. And you should be engaging with the FDA and the payers early and often. Because if you wait too long, you're going to get so far down the road, you're going to be screwed.
Adam, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, well said. I think from my perspective, I think what we heard kind of in the introductions is type 1 diabetes is personal. And I think it's the people that are in it and innovating and doing the great things. It's personal, and that's passion carries it forward. What we all really need is more support from the broader healthcare system, and recognizing, hey, there's an opportunity to prevent and to ultimately find cures. We just need to pour more energy, more resources into kind of this relatively small market as a broader kind of diabetes niche, because this is something that's highly addressable with the right passion and really purpose.
So, Diane, you're doing something a little different than everybody up here. You're working on a molecule. Can you unpack that a little bit? Not only do a lot of people not understand type 1 diabetes in the general community at a lot of these larger health conferences, but you're also not a digital health company. Can you talk a little bit about what work you're doing and help us understand it?
Sure. So I came from an investment banking background and fell in love with biotech impact investing. I was fortunate enough to meet some very smart scientists, particularly one who had enabled several chemistry platforms that turned into multiple drugs. We had a vision together of going after some targets. There was no specific target to look at, but it became a target of interest for us within the GPCR family, which is the most approved family of drugs. And the target was GPR 119. Actually, Helmsley has funded a...
Explain what that is for people who don't...
Well, it's within the family of protein targets. This particular target we have found activates, and I would call him our chief scientific officer. He's on our scientific advisory board and runs everything we do in diabetes and obesity. We're also going in that area. But what we have found is that it activates glucagon on the alpha cell and does it autonomously, which is really cool. So, I mean, it's not AI, but imagine as an adjunct to insulin that it comes in, and if you are going low, it adjusts it and it doesn't let you go high. So if we're right, it's a game changer. And we just have to keep going because our preclinical data was so fantastic. We were selected at the American Diabetes Association to show our data under late breaking news. We are advancing our program now. We're filing for IND shortly. And just today, I announced that we have added onto our team ex-staff counsel for the FDA. He was there till 2019 under new drug research and evaluation. So hopefully he's going to help us get through the clinic faster through breakthrough drug status. And yeah, it's a long journey it's been, but it's getting very exciting.
So thank you, Diane. So eddii is might look like a simple app for kids. Can you talk about how to demystify that a little bit and make it not only so maybe funders and other people might take another look, but how unique of an approach you're taking from most digital apps that are focusing on helping kids do anything good?
So that's the whole point, Steve. It is simple. We want to simplify it for children, and we want to make it enjoyable, and we want to engage them so that they want to manage their diabetes. They want to look at their number rather than having to and being nagged to by their parents. In the background, though, eddii is extremely smart. It is AI driven, so that not only does it offer education and care, but over time it becomes smarter. It links your feelings to your blood glucose, for example. We will be able to know whether the way the user is feeling is driven by their blood glucose, a continuous high, for example, or not, and offer them mental health through eddii's chatbot and triage them to a mental health professional as and when needed. It's those little types of smart cliques that we've built into the app, but the way eddii portrays it, it's super fun. It's bedtime stories and jokes and chit-chat on our chatbot and games so that they associate their condition with positive feelings rather than a chore that they have to do every day.
So I want to shift and feel free, anybody can jump in on data. Traction, is it working? Do you have users? Do you have customers? Do you have progress? One of the things in typical startup land is people want to see, is it working or when will it work, and getting some visibility on that. And I want to start, Ole, with you and then Amy. Tell us a little bit about users, data. Is it working? Will it work? Or when will it work?
Yeah, so one of the first things we did was actually sponsored by UK Innovate. That was when we had the first prototype. We said, okay, this needs to work with everybody. So we went to 2 refugee camps, one in Jordan and one in Malaysia, with some of the most vulnerable populations. And we said, can they actually work this out? Can they manage this, and do they like it? So so that was the first sort of journey, sort of getting some real data. And we published those data last year at ADA. And in short, yes, they liked it. They could figure out how to operate the pen and find that the benefits of it were something that would becoming something that in their world. And I think that's important as well when you're talking about vulnerable populations, that you develop something that is available in their realm and their payment schemes. And that's at least, that has been the departure from us and very important from us to sort of build something that is positive for them and realistic as well. So,
Thanks, Ole. Amy?
Ours, we are starting out, we are going, and we set out to prove 4 different routes of distribution. 1 was in grocery to make it mainstream. 2 was in healthcare. 3 was in a more, healthcare, I mean like hospitals and different kinds of routes. And then getting into different payer systems is a next goal. So we are going into Walmart diabetes aisle in the next 2 weeks. We'll be in 2,000 stores. We are pioneering a new snacking section that they've never had before. They realized that they weren't filling in a gap, particularly with people with type 1 in this aisle. And it's actually a really new thing for them that they've really been behind us, which is fantastic. Then we are actually in different grocery stores, and you can just buy us like everything else next to a Kind bar. So that kid you can throw in, and this is the point about our objective about not making people feel otherized. You can create something around that's for a specific medical and health concern, but everybody needs to be eating this way too. So, and the first thing after somebody gets diagnosed is, what do I eat? And usually there's never a place for them to point to. There's definitely not anything you can buy in the store. And then you go up in education. So
I can't wait to try it.
we're going to be working with eddii basically, because this also shows the community of there's just a lot of different things I think in terms of our consumers we can do.
Absolutely. Looking forward. So in terms of our traction, so we just launched eddii 2 weeks ago in the state of Oklahoma, our pilot state, because of the rural communities in that state. And we have around 1,200 users already. We have a wait list of around 12,000 people. We are launching in Texas next week, so we're very excited about that. And what really led to our launch is obviously it took us a really long time, including dealing with the FDA and cumbersome partnerships with partners in the diabetes space. But we have a real-time API partnership with Dexcom. And the prerequisite to that, we ran a clinical trial in collaboration with Dexcom, where we proved that the children who used eddii actually improved their time in range by 5.38% versus those who didn't. Surprisingly, though, half of our wait list are adults, and they are using our app. So we are now in discussions within our team as to our strategy. Do we focus on pediatric? Do we bring in an adult version to the market? Type 2s with Dexcom are on our platform. So lots of decisions to be made, all very exciting.
Kind of fun to see what the market wants and needs. I want to be mindful of time. Adam, Diane, and then I want to actually go right to you. And is what you're doing working?
So from our standpoint, so we commercially launched this year. So we've screened over 230 patients. All of them are type 1, people with type 1 diabetes. So we're excited about that. Also, I think relative to milestones is, I think David had brought up kind of reimbursement. So we achieved a CPT code, and we'll have a fee schedule and reimbursement beginning January of next year. So that's great for all people with diabetes as well as for our business.
And too preliminary, right?
Work. Yeah, we have preclinical data that's very strong, and it's continuing to be strong. And we are filing our IND shortly. We're scaling up commercial volumes of the compound, and so far we've got great indications on purity and everything else. So we're excited.
Excellent. So David, I kind of talk about you being one of the biggest funders. Specifically you, among all of the organizations and leaders of organizations that we met with, have a very entrepreneurial view of making stuff happen and not being okay with status quo. You've been funding for the last 15 years. What's working and what's not working, if you don't mind? Because I think you have a vantage point, very, very unique vantage point and perspective of what's needed.
So I think what's working and what we've been successful at is, I'd say, incremental improvements in care. So when I first started out, a continuous glucose monitor, it didn't exist, right? We now have 3 of them on the market. They are now the go-to, if you want to manage your disease, CGM, continuous glucose monitors, is the way to manage those diseases. We, along with JDRF, put out a mini RFP for about $25 million. And we went to the 3 companies who were already playing in the space and said, we want you to go faster. JDRF and Helmsley ended up funding Medtronic and Becton Dickinson directly. We funded Dexcom on our own. We funded Dexcom G6. So I'd say that part of it has been successful. Having the T1D exchange, which was a registry we created back in 2009, illuminate actually how poorly people in this country are doing. That was extremely enlightening to both the FDA, the payers, et cetera. If you ask my kids, I failed miserably. So I'm still here every day because they're still living with the disease. So I guess it depends on what your perspective is.
As a final wrap-up question, I want to ask you, we talk a lot about mindset at StartUp Health, and we believe that it's the visionary optimism of entrepreneurship and funders and partners who believe and have hope that the future is bigger than the past and better than the past. And there is no shortage of informed pessimists out there to shoot you down, to tell you why it's not going to work. But to those who might be doubting or wondering, are the next 10 years going to be different than the last 10 years? Or maybe is the next 20 years going to be different than the last 20 years when it comes to type 1 diabetes innovation? I'm going to start with you, Ole, and we're going to come back and end with David.
Thank you. So in 10 years, no one is using syringes to inject insulin, period. We don't think that's a decent way, and it's not the right way to manage disease. We know it's so important to have blood sugar control, and it's difficult to do. And we need to be able to give modern devices for everyone, everywhere in the whole world. And that's our mission. Thank you.
Ours is providing accessible solutions that can be distributed to all. I'd love to see a world that's not where the shelves are not dominated by things that are laden with sugar and other things, and we can actually bring up different people in the food system and different independent makers.
For us, we want to improve time and range for everyone to be 90% and above, and for the T1D community to not suffer from mental health problems, to just go about their lives like any other individual, not having to worry about managing their T1D. Thank you.
Yeah, from our perspective, so we want to make preventative screening a standard in diabetes the same way that it is in oncology as well as cardiology. Ultimately, a lot of the complications and comorbidities are highly preventable. So our moonshot is really how do we start to screen and prevent what can be prevented.
Well, we would like to think we're going to do it in well under 10 years. So our mission is to prevent hypoglycemia for 100 million people that are affected by it, of which 90% of the type 1 population is affected by it, which comprises about 18 million people, with a product that is safe, accessible, and affordable.
I don't have a crystal ball, and I'm not going to tell you what it's going to be like in 10 years, but I'll tell you what I tell my own children, and that is what you're doing today is going to be the hardest it's going to be in your life. It's only going to get easier, and I have seen that even in the decade between my 2 children's diagnosis. I spend my life trying to make that difference.
Yeah, well, each of you are in very important ways working on preventing, managing, and curing type 1 diabetes. And when we launched this moonshot, it was just a vision. Over the last 18 months, and really over this past year, we have, with your partnership, David, been able to build a community of 25 entrepreneurs and innovators from 6 different countries, all working together, building friendships and collaborations and trying to figure out what's working, what's not working, who's helpful and who's not helpful. We call everybody in StartUp Health's community health transformers, but it's not possible without Health Moonshot champions like Helmsley. So David, we are eternally grateful for your support for this moonshot, for your leadership at pushing the envelope to make sure that status quo is not enough. But we are all sitting here today at the first year of the type 1 diabetes moonshot, And I want to come back each year, show the progress that we're making, see the community grow, but want to thank all of you for getting up every day, doing what you do, and making sure that the future is bigger than the past. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.